Genesis begins with the story of creation, a moment when God spoke, and the heavens and the earth were born. But what if the creation we know, the Genesis we read, is not the complete story? What if there is a hidden chapter, a missing piece that holds the secrets of a time before time, a story erased from the pages of history? In the silence that follows Genesis chapter 1:1, there lies a profound mystery. The earth is described as formless and empty, covered in darkness. But what existed before this? Could there have been a world that came before the one we know, a creation that failed, leaving behind chaos and the need for restoration? Ancient texts, like the Book of Enoch and the Zohar, speak of this lost chapter, an untold story that was deliberately hidden by those who guarded the sacred scriptures. This missing chapter doesn't begin with the creation of light. It begins with something far older. It speaks of a rebellion of spiritual beings, of a cosmic war fought before the earth's formation. These beings were created from light, from fire, yet some defied the divine order, and their rebellion shattered the peace of the universe. In this forgotten narrative, the creation of the world wasn't the first beginning. It was the beginning of a restoration, a rebirth from the wreckage of a cosmic battle. God, in his wisdom, saw fit to erase this chapter from the written record, believing that humanity wasn't ready for such knowledge. The spirits of the ancient sages may have seen this story as too complex, too dangerous to reveal. But fragments of this story remain, hidden in the mystical texts and the unspoken words of the ancients, waiting for those with eyes to see. Genesis, as we know it, begins in the midst of chaos, with God's Spirit hovering over the waters. But what if this wasn't the true beginning? What if the world we see, the creation we read about, was merely a second chance, a restoration of a reality that had already fallen? The missing chapter tells of a time before the fall, when God wasn't alone, when other beings witnessed the formation of the heavens and the earth. The rebellion that took place then still echoes through the ages, shaping everything we see today. This story, hidden for so long, is calling out to be discovered. As we dig deeper into the mysteries of Genesis, we may uncover not just the truth of creation, but the spiritual history that has been concealed for millennia, waiting for us to awaken to its lessons. The silence in the beginning isn't a void. It's an invitation to search, to look beyond the surface and discover the divine drama that unfolded long before the first light ever shone. Genesis begins in a way that feels like the earth is already in a state of chaos, where the creation of the world unfolds not from a clean, pure canvas, but from something far more complex. In the very first verses of the Bible, we are introduced to a world formless, empty, and covered in darkness. It is as if we're stepping into a scene of cosmic destruction rather than a new creation. Why, we may wonder, does the Bible begin this way? Why does the world seem to already be in a state of disarray, rather than from a place of divine perfection? In the silence of this opening, there's something profound that has often been overlooked. Many have accepted Genesis as the true beginning. But what if there is more to this story, a beginning before the beginning? What if the Bible, in its divine wisdom, was not just revealing the start of something new, but rather the start of a restoration, a cosmic repair of something that had fallen before? This isn't a story of a perfect world coming into existence, but a world being reborn after a fall, perhaps the first fall. Genesis 1 doesn't describe creation from nothing. It could very well be a divine act of redemption, pulling order from the chaos that existed before. And so, we find ourselves asking, why is there no mention of what came before this chaos? Why is the Bible silent about the state of the earth before God began his work of restoration. The question is even more pressing when we consider the spiritual context, the world before the fall, the events that shaped the cosmos, and the beings that inhabited it. Could the Earth's chaotic state in Genesis be a reflection of a divine decision to restore something that had been marred by rebellion? The absence of this knowledge in the scriptures is not just a historical gap, it's a silence that raises suspicion. Ancient texts, like the Kabbalah and the Book of Enoch, suggest there was something more, an earlier world, an earlier fall. It's a chapter missing from our Bible, and with it, much of the cosmic story of creation. As we turn the pages of Scripture, we realize that Genesis, in its opening verses, may not be telling the full story. It may be that God wasn't starting creation from a place of pristine perfection, but from the rubble of a lost world. The question becomes, why was this early creation, this first chapter of the cosmos, erased from the sacred text? Why was this divine history, so critical to understanding the full scope of God's plan for the world, removed? The answer, as it has been proposed by scholars of ancient Jewish mysticism, may be more complex than we realize. Some believe that this first creation was erased because its content was too dangerous to share. The events described in this hidden chapter may have been so spiritually disruptive that the leaders of ancient Israel chose to suppress them, to protect the people from a truth that they weren't yet ready to bear. What if this earlier creation wasn't as perfect as we are led to believe? What if it involved a rebellion of spiritual beings, a fall that caused such destruction that God chose to wipe it away from memory? This is not merely a matter of theological speculation. Ancient Jewish mysticism holds that there were other divine beings, beings of light, who existed with God before the creation of the world. These beings, called primordials in some texts, were neither angels nor men, but existed in a realm of spiritual light, called Orkadmon. Some of these beings, however, rebelled. And in their rebellion, they did not just oppose God's will, they introduced disorder and chaos into the very fabric of creation. It was this rebellion, it is said, that led to the first cosmic war, one that shook the heavens and the earth to their core. And so, God, in his infinite wisdom, chose to erase this creation, to begin anew, as described in Genesis. What we read in the opening verses of Genesis may be the story of God's restoration, not his first act of creation. What if the world we know today is actually the second chance, the rebirth of something that had fallen long before humanity was created? This understanding of Genesis changes the way we approach the text. It's not simply the story of how the world began. It is the story of how the world was repaired. But how did we come to lose the knowledge of this earlier creation? The answer may lie in the spiritual wisdom of those who guarded the sacred texts. The elders of Israel, many believe, recognized the danger of revealing such profound truths about the fall, the rebellion, and the cosmic battles that had preceded humanity. They feared that such knowledge would lead to confusion, idolatry, or even heresy. In their wisdom, they chose to keep these secrets hidden, to protect the people from a truth that could be too overwhelming. Yet, despite these efforts to erase this lost chapter of creation, fragments of it have survived. The Book of Enoch, the Zohar, and other ancient writings contain hints and allusions to a time before the world we know, a time of spiritual beings who once inhabited the heavens and who were part of the divine story before the earth was formed. The rebellion of these beings, their defiance of divine order, and the war that followed are still echoed in these texts, waiting for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. The story of creation as we know it is far more than just the physical world coming into being. It is a story of restoration, of healing, and of redemption. And this is where we find the true meaning of Genesis. The opening verses of Genesis are not the start of the world, but the moment of rebirth, a divine act to restore order from the chaos that preceded it. God, in His grace and mercy, allowed a new creation to emerge from the ruins of the old. But why was this earlier story hidden? Why has it remained buried for so long? Some scholars argue that it was not meant to be forgotten, but to be revealed at the right time, when humanity would be spiritually prepared to understand it. What if we are now living in that time, a time when the truths of this lost chapter are beginning to resurface, revealing the divine drama that unfolded before Genesis 1:1. The lost chapter of Genesis isn't just a mystery to be solved, it's a spiritual truth waiting to be discovered. As we delve deeper into the mysteries of the Bible, we may find that the story of creation is not just about the world we see today, but about the spiritual battles and divine decisions that shaped the very fabric of reality. And as we ponder the hidden chapter of Genesis, we come to realize that the true story of creation is not just about the earth, the heavens, or the beginning of time. It's about the ongoing restoration of the world, the healing of what was broken, and the divine plan that is unfolding even now. The story of creation is still being written, and it is one that will continue to unfold as we seek the hidden truths that lie buried in the depths of the Bible. The story of creation, as we read in Genesis, often feels like a new beginning, a fresh start for the earth, where God spoke the world into existence. Yet the more we ponder the opening verses of Genesis, the more it becomes clear that the story might not be as simple as it first seems. Genesis, as we know it, begins with a world that is formless, empty, and covered in darkness. But where does this darkness come from? Why is the world described in this chaotic state, instead of starting from a place of divine perfection? What if Genesis isn't starting from nothing at all, but from the remnants of something that existed before? What if the true beginning of creation is not in Genesis 1:1:1, but in a lost chapter, erased from the records, where the earth and its cosmic structure were already in ruins? This idea isn't some modern-day theory, but one rooted in ancient texts and traditions that speak of a creation before the creation we know. Before the earth was formed in the shape we recognize today, there was a spiritual dimension, a realm that was inhabited by beings of light. These beings existed in a primordial world that existed before the material world. According to these ancient texts, there was a cosmic rebellion that occurred long before God began the work of shaping the earth. These beings, known as the primordials, were created in a state of purity, light, and fire. They were neither angels nor humans, but spiritual entities that existed in a sphere of light called Orkadmon. But some of these beings, in their free will, rebelled. This rebellion didn't just create chaos in the heavens, it shattered the divine order, leaving behind a world in ruin. This is where Genesis 1:1 comes in, not as the beginning of everything, but as the moment when God began to restore what was lost. The world we know today is not the first world, but the second, a world reborn from the chaos that preceded it. The silence of the Bible regarding what came before Genesis is not a mere oversight. It's a deliberate omission. The sacred texts, particularly those of Jewish mysticism, suggest that the elders of Israel deliberately erased this knowledge from the scriptures, fearing that its revelation would lead to spiritual confusion, idolatry, or even heresy. This lost knowledge was too powerful, too dangerous for the people of Israel, or for anyone really, to grasp at the time. Yet, despite their efforts to suppress it, fragments of this lost chapter have survived. Texts like the Book of Enoch, the Zohar, and the Sefer Harajim speak of this earlier creation. They reveal a world filled with spiritual beings who were present when God laid the foundations of the earth. But more than that, these texts speak of a time before the material creation, a time when God's creation was still spiritual and pure. And in this earlier realm, a rebellion occurred, a rebellion that led to the fall of the first creation, a fall that caused the heavens and earth to be shaken to their very core. This lost chapter of Genesis tells a story not just of creation, but of the battle between light and darkness, between order and chaos. It tells of beings who were created from light, from fire, and who, in their desire for power and independence, rebelled against God. And it was this rebellion that caused the first war in heaven, a war that left behind the ruins of a world that had to be erased and rebuilt. Why, we might ask, was this world wiped away? And why was the knowledge of it erased from the Bible? The answer lies in the nature of creation itself. The spiritual dimension before creation, according to Jewish mystical traditions, was a place where divine light could not fully inhabit. The vessels, or the spiritual containers that held the divine light, were unable to bear the weight of that light. The result was a cosmic rupture, a spiritual disaster that caused the light to spill out, shattering the vessels and plunging the world into chaos. This is the moment that God, in his mercy and wisdom, chose to restore the creation. But he did not start from scratch. Instead, he began again, repairing what had been broken, rebuilding from the ruins of the previous world. This idea is reinforced by the teachings of the Kabbalah, where the concept of the breaking of the vessels is central. According to this teaching, God's divine light was so powerful that when it entered the world, the vessels created to hold it could not withstand the intensity. The result was a spiritual collapse, a cosmic chaos that preceded the creation we read about in Genesis. But God, in his grace, decided to rebuild from the ashes of that fall, creating a new world from the remnants of the old. This new world was not created from nothing. It was created from the broken pieces of the previous creation. The earth, in its initial state, was described as formless and void, not because it was empty, but because it had been marred by the events that preceded it. The waters that covered the earth were not simply water. In Hebrew symbolism, water represents chaos, judgment, and ancestral memory. These waters were a reflection of the spiritual disaster that had taken place before, waters that carried the memory of the fall, the rebellion, and the destruction. In the first verses of Genesis, we see God's Spirit hovering over these waters, preparing to bring order from the chaos. This moment is not the beginning of creation, but the restoration of a broken world. The work of creation, as described in Genesis, is not an act of starting from nothing, but of God's divine will, bringing order and light into a world already touched by darkness and destruction. Genesis 1:1 marks the beginning of this restoration, the moment when God begins to fix what was broken. This idea of restoration rather than creation challenges the way we traditionally view the story of Genesis. It asks us to consider that what we call the creation of the world is actually a second chance, a new beginning after a fall that occurred long before humanity was ever created. The earth we live on, the world we inhabit, is not the first version of the world. It is a version that has been repaired and restored. And the story of Genesis, then, is not just a story of creation, it is a story of redemption, of God's love and mercy in restoring a fallen world. The idea of the lost chapter of Genesis, the chapter that speaks of the rebellion of the spiritual beings before creation, offers us a profound insight into the nature of the world and the divine plan. It tells us that creation is not just about bringing something new into existence. It's about restoring what was lost. It tells us that the world we know is not the first world, but a world that has been reborn from the ashes of a previous reality. And this understanding of Genesis, this view of creation as restoration, brings us closer to understanding the larger divine plan. It teaches us that everything in the world is part of a cosmic story, a story that began long before our time, and one that continues to unfold even now. It teaches us that God's plan for the world is not just about creation, but about healing, about bringing order from chaos, and about restoring what was lost. This is the true story of creation, the story of a world that was lost and has been given a second chance. As we move forward, we see that this story of creation, this story of restoration, is not just about the past. It's about the present and the future as well. The story of creation is still unfolding, and we are a part of it. Each choice we make, each act of obedience, each moment of repentance is part of this larger story of redemption. We are not just living in the world, we are participating in its restoration. We are heirs to the mission of healing and rebuilding a broken world, just as God healed and rebuilt the world before us. The true story of creation is a story of redemption, a story that continues to unfold, and one that we are called to be a part of. The truth hidden in the silence of Genesis speaks volumes about the nature of creation and the divine plan. For millennia, the opening verses of the Bible have been read as the beginning of all things, the creation of a new world from nothing. However, what if the true beginning of creation is not what we have always believed? What if the world we know with its light and life is the second attempt at creation? And what if the fall we understand, Adam and Eve's disobedience in the Garden of Eden, is merely a repetition of something that happened long before? The idea that Genesis is a restoration rather than a creation from nothing can be traced back to the lost chapter of the Bible, a chapter hidden from human knowledge. According to ancient traditions, Genesis as we know it doesn't begin at the beginning but starts after a cosmic catastrophe. In the realm of Jewish mysticism, this lost chapter speaks of a time before time, a creation before creation. And in this forgotten realm, divine beings, beings of light and fire, once inhabited the heavens, witnessing the formation of the universe. These beings were created in purity and light, but some fell before the material world even existed. They rebelled, and their rebellion brought destruction, chaos, and cosmic ruin. This earlier creation, according to scholars of Jewish mysticism and the ancient texts of the Kabbalah, was a spiritual realm that existed before the physical world. In this realm, spiritual beings, referred to as the primordials, were created to inhabit the divine light. They were neither angels nor humans, but existed as pure spiritual beings of light. But some of these beings, in their free will, chose to rebel against the divine order. This rebellion wasn't just an act of disobedience, it shattered the fabric of the cosmos, plunging the heavens and the earth into chaos. The first fall before the fall of humanity was a cosmic war fought in the spiritual realms. And it is this earlier fall that is believed to be the reason for the chaotic state described in Genesis chapter 1-2. The world described in Genesis was not newly created, but was the result of divine intervention to restore order. The earth, in its initial state, was described as formless and void, because it had already been marred by the consequences of this spiritual rebellion. It was not the first creation, but the moment when God began the process of restoring a world that had been ruined. But why was this earlier creation erased? Why was this truth hidden from humanity? The answer lies in the understanding that some knowledge is too profound for humans to grasp, especially when it concerns the deep spiritual realities of the universe. According to the teachings of the ancient rabbis, the knowledge of the fall before the fall was so complex and so dangerous that it needed to be hidden away. It was believed that revealing the details of this cosmic rebellion would lead to spiritual confusion, idol worship, or worse, a deeper fall into darkness. The elders of Israel, guardians of the sacred scriptures, made a conscious decision to suppress this knowledge in order to protect the people and preserve the purity of their faith. Yet, despite the efforts to erase this earlier creation, remnants of this story have survived through other texts. The Book of Enoch, the Zohar, and other mystical writings contain fragments of this lost chapter, pointing to a world that existed before Genesis 1:1. In these texts, we read of the primordials, the spiritual beings of light, and their rebellion. We read of the cosmic destruction that followed and the subsequent restoration of the world we know. These texts serve as windows into a divine drama that unfolded long before the creation of the material world, offering glimpses into the deeper mysteries of existence. And so, as we look at Genesis, we realize that the creation story is not merely about God speaking light into existence. It's about God restoring a world that had fallen before, a world that was lost and then reborn. The first creation wasn't the beginning, but the restoration of a broken world. The chaos that is described in Genesis chapter 1:2 is not the beginning of creation. It's the aftermath of a rebellion that took place long before. This deeper understanding of Genesis shifts the way we view the Bible and its message. It reveals that creation is not just about bringing something new into existence, but about restoring what was lost. The story of Genesis is not a simple tale of light overcoming darkness. It is a cosmic story of redemption, of bringing order from chaos, and of God's love and mercy in healing what had been broken. As we explore the spiritual truths hidden in the Bible, we begin to see that God's plan is far grander than we often imagine. The creation we know today is not the original creation. It is a second chance, a world that has been reborn from the ashes of a previous cosmic catastrophe. The creation of light in Genesis is not a new beginning, but a divine act of restoration, where God reorders the chaos and prepares the earth for life. And in this restoration, we see a reflection of God's ongoing work in our own lives, as He seeks to restore what has been broken and bring healing to our souls. This understanding of Genesis leads us to the realization that the world we live in is not the first version of the world. It is a world that has been shaped by divine intervention and is part of a much larger cosmic story, a story that began long before the first human beings walked the earth. And the story of redemption, of restoring what was lost, continues to unfold in our own time, as God works to bring His kingdom to earth and to restore all things to their original purpose. As we move forward in our understanding of Genesis, we see that it is not just the story of the earth and the heavens, it is the story of our own spiritual journey. Just as God restored the world from the chaos that preceded it, so too does He seek to restore our hearts and minds, healing the brokenness within us and bringing us into the fullness of His divine plan. The creation story then becomes a story of redemption, a story of how God, in His grace, restores what was lost and makes all things new. And as we delve deeper into this mystery, we come to understand that the journey of creation is not over. The work of restoration continues, and we are called to participate in it. Just as God restored the world from chaos, so too are we invited to join in His work of healing and renewal. Every act of kindness, every moment of forgiveness, every choice to live in harmony with God's will is a part of the ongoing restoration of the world. We are not mere bystanders in this divine drama. We are active participants in the restoration of creation, called to bring light into the darkness and healing to the brokenness that surrounds us. As we reflect on the mysteries hidden in Genesis, we realize that we are part of a much larger story. A story of cosmic redemption that began long before we were born and will continue long after we have passed. The creation we know is just a chapter in this greater narrative, a narrative of God's love and mercy that extends beyond time and space. And as we seek to understand our place in this story, we are reminded that the true work of creation is not about the physical world alone, but about the restoration of all things, spiritual, emotional, and physical. In the end, Genesis is not just the story of the creation of the earth, it is the story of the restoration of the world, a world that was lost and is being brought back to life through the divine act of redemption. The message of Genesis is clear. God's work of creation and restoration is ongoing, and we are called to participate in it. As we continue to explore the deeper meanings of Genesis, we come to understand that we are not just passive observers of creation, but active participants in the ongoing work of bringing order from chaos and light from darkness. Through our actions, our faith, and our love, we can contribute to the healing and restoration of the world around us, joining with God in His work of making all things new. The mysteries of Genesis run deeper than we've ever truly understood. It's a story of creation, yes, but also of restoration, redemption, and divine grace. As we've ventured through the hidden truths and silent spaces between the lines of Scripture, we've uncovered a story that's been waiting to be told. A story that goes beyond the physical act of creation and touches on the spiritual battle that took place long before the first light was spoken into existence. As we reflect on these ancient truths, we realize that the world we know today is not the first world. It's a world that has been shaped by divine intervention, a world that has been restored after a cosmic fall that preceded us. The very opening verses of Genesis speak not of a fresh start, but of a new beginning, a world being born again from the ashes of a reality that had already fallen. This hidden chapter of the Bible speaks of beings of light, of a rebellion that shook the very heavens, and of a divine plan to restore what was lost. It is a story that has been deliberately concealed, hidden for centuries to protect humanity from a truth too profound for most to comprehend. But now, as the veil begins to lift, we are called to see, to understand, and to awaken to a deeper, more sacred truth. The silence in Genesis is not a void. It's an invitation to explore, to question, and to search for what has been lost. It's an invitation to dig deeper into the mysteries of creation and to discover the divine plan that unfolds not just in the beginning, but in every moment that follows. From the chaos that preceded creation to the world we live in now, there is a story of restoration that is far greater than we ever imagined. And this story, while ancient, continues to shape our lives today. It calls us to participate in the ongoing work of restoration in the world around us, to heal the brokenness we see in ourselves and others, and to bring light into the darkness that still persists. As we stand at the crossroads of history and eternity, we realize that we are not just observers of this divine story. We are active participants in it. Each choice we make, each action we take, is a part of this grand cosmic drama. We are called to repair what was broken, to restore what has been lost, and to bring about the redemption of the world that began long before our time and will continue long after we are gone. The story of creation is a story of hope, of redemption, and of divine love that knows no end. It's a story that is still being written, and we are invited to play a part in it. This is not just a tale from the past, it's a living, breathing reality that is unfolding in each moment of our lives. The creation we see around us, the light, the earth, the heavens, is a reflection of a deeper spiritual truth. And as we discover these hidden truths in the Bible, we are reminded that the work of restoration is ongoing. It's a work that begins in our hearts and extends to the world around us. We are part of a greater plan, one that transcends time and space, one that is rooted in the divine purpose of redemption. As you reflect on the story of creation, I encourage you to dig deeper into the mysteries of Genesis, to seek out the hidden truths that lie within the scriptures, and to understand the deeper spiritual truths that have been waiting for us to uncover. This is not just a story of the past, it is a story that shapes our present and our future. And as we awaken to these truths, we are invited to join in the work of restoration, to bring healing to a broken world, and to share the light of God's love with all those around us. So, if you found this video meaningful, if these ancient truths have sparked something within you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Join us as we continue to explore the mysteries of the Bible and uncover the truths that have been hidden for so long. Together, we can be a part of this divine story of restoration, a story that is still unfolding today. And as you take part in this journey, remember that the work of redemption is not just something that happened long ago. It's something that is happening right now, in your life and in mine.